Hello, everyone. I just wanted to take a few minutes to check in again this week, talk about last week a little bit, and then talk about this coming week and looking ahead to next week as we start our first analysis paper. So we just ended Unit 4. Everything should have been turned in yesterday. I did, while I'm thinking about it, I did just go through and adjust quiz grades. I had a few of you email me concerned about the fill-in-the-blank questions. The way Blackboard has fill-in-the-blank questions set up is if you don't answer it exactly as its input, it counts it wrong. So if it's stream of consciousness technique, and I didn't put in technique for the answer and you wrote technique for your answer, it was wrong. If you had a misspelled word, it was wrong. If you capitalized a word that wasn't supposed to be capitalized, it was wrong. So I've adjusted all of your grades based on those answers, just for spelling, capitalization, any issue that your answer was correct, it just wasn't exactly as input by me. So take a look at your assignments or your grades, see if you have any questions, let me know. But other than that, you had your discussion board that talked about point of view and the two stories. You should have definitely walked away after reading those two stories, understanding how point of view impacts the understanding, the message, the way an author wants you to read the story. We also looked at Soldier's Home. This is a great example of setting and characterization. It talks a lot about Krebs' little unique day-to-day activities that he does. He has a routine, and it seems like a lot of y'all picked up on that. So I haven't graded all of the discussion boards. That'll be in the works today and tomorrow, but be sure to take a look at your grades once those come through as well. So now we're moving into Unit 5. For those of y'all who are like, oh, this semester's dragging on, rest assured, we have 3 weeks left and then we have spring break. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel, at least for the middle of this semester. So looking at Unit 5, we are going to be talking about symbolism, which basically is going to show you something that's said in literature that symbolizes something else, that means something else. Excuse me. Meyer defines a symbol as a person, object, or event that suggests more than its literal meaning. Think about symbols and then thinking about symbols and discovering what exactly they mean it's not easy. A lot of people really need practice in this. I still don't get every symbol that an author makes, and sometimes we're guilty of this as English instructors. We find symbols where there was none. The author meant what they meant, but it seems like he could have meant more. So don't get upset, don't get discouraged if this is not an easy one for you. It is more difficult to kind of find what someone else is saying when you're not talking to them, when they're not fully saying, it's like this. So in chapter 20, chapter 7, page 220, it talks about symbols, conventional and literary symbols. Thinking of conventional as like a cross. It means Christianity, Jesus, it is what it is. A literary symbol can be traditional, conventional, or public, but may also be established by the context in which it's used in the specific story. So if you think about a literary symbol, it can be a character, an object, a name, anything else that suggests other meanings. And it's also important, just as we always say, just because you interpret it this way doesn't mean your friend's going to interpret it the same way. It's the same with symbols. You may take it to mean something, but I may take it to mean something completely different. As long as you can justify your reasoning, you're not incorrect. So I want you to look at the reading assignment in the class activities. There's a PDF file called Clothes. It's a short reading assignment. And then read pages 220 and 223 in your text that talk about symbolism. And then 247 to 250 discusses theme. And then there's a follow-up short story called The Bride Comes to Yellow Sky on pages 250 to 258. There's also in your class activities a little blurb about how to read literature. So for now, we've gone through 4 or 5 weeks of kind of reading it and practicing the different literary themes that we're looking at: symbolism, setting, point of view. We're looking at those specific things. This breaks down more of a way to analyze the literature that you're reading. So you should be ideally, I know you all have lives. I know a lot of you are dual credit students and play sports, and other adult students work. But ideally, you should be reading these stories more than once. The first time you read it, you should just be getting a feel for it, understanding what's happening, where it's going, just start to finish, not really thinking about it. At this point, you can annotate, you can ask yourself questions. If you're confused as to why this person's doing it, jot it down. And you should be able to understand those literary techniques that we've been talking about. For the second reading, you should develop patterns. See if there's, like with Krebs, if there's something they do every single day, understand what's going on in their head, understand what their daily actions are, understand what makes them tick. Add additional information to the character as you reread the text, and try the questions that you weren't sure about, or that you were like, oh, why is this important? After you know the ending, that second reading should come back and you should start to fill in the blanks and, oh, this is why that makes sense now. But you should come up, or you may come up with other questions as you read it a second time. The final piece in your class activities is the instructions and details for your close reading assignment, which is due next week. I do highly suggest looking ahead at that. Most of the information you need is in this unit, but I want you to start thinking about it this week, because since you have already taken Comp 1, there isn't a rough draft on this. There isn't a big writing process. You're expected to know the grammatical, the MLA formatting, the structure of an essay, and write it. So in the folder labeled Close Reading Assignment Instructions due March 4th, there's some more details. You should be picking one story that we've read that interests you. The only limitation is not to choose clothes, because there is a sample paper over that in this folder, so I don't want it to look too familiar based on that. It should be between 2 and 4 pages. This is probably the biggest point deduction that I get on this paper. There is a specific outline that we'll go over in a second that you need to follow, and it should be at least, at a very minimum, 2 pages. And for some reason, every semester I get students writing an intro paragraph, kind of telling me what the story is about, going over one literary technique, and closing it out. That's going to be a huge point deduction, because you're not hitting all of the elements addressed. So make sure as you're writing your paper, you look at this next element that we're going to look at and follow the outline given. It should be double spaced, should be 12-point font, Times New Roman or Courier New, a very basic font. You have to have a title after the heading. Make sure you edit it. It should be free of grammatical errors as close as possible. Because this is a Comp 2 class, I'm grading with grammar in mind. There will be an element of grammar in your rubric, but I'm not going to go through and individually edit the grammar for you like I did in Comp 1 if you had me for Comp 1. It will just be a 7 out of 10, a few errors, or 10 out of 10, excellent type thing. So it will be up to you to pick up those grammatical errors and fix them. And then you need a works cited and internal citations. That's why we've been doing this in the discussions, to get you used to working on citing these works. You're only looking at one work, so it should be just like a discussion. You should have the quotes with the author and page number, or author and paragraph number, and then an end page that gives me the full citation. So what we're doing with this paper is dissecting a piece of literature, dissecting one of the stories you want to look at, one of the stories that you were really involved in, or that you just really enjoyed. So You may not have done it in the past because of time restraints, and I understand that, but for this paper, you want to go back through and read it at least a second time, maybe a third time, and take notes. Make observations, circle words you don't understand, ask questions, write in the margins, anything that comes to mind when you're reading it, annotate it. I want you to think about the details that are given, the symbols that are given, the literary techniques that we have discussed in this paper. So there is a sample paper that you can look at, but you can't use closed, again, the one from this week for the essay. So the outline is given in this piece. What is a close reading in that folder? You should choose a quote out of the story that you find is most important to the plot or theme. The quote shouldn't be longer than a paragraph, so I don't want a whole page written here, and it needs to have an in-text citation at the end of it. It'll be your header with your last name and page number, the heading with your name, my name, the date, the class, the title, and then directly under the title, you'll have a double space, and then the quote will be single spaced right below it. It's just, this is the quote I'm focusing on. No intro, no anything right there. It's just the quote. You want to pick a quote, a line, a paragraph that gives insightful information about a character, a theme, the overall moral setting, the point of view, the plot, something. There's so many different elements in these stories that have very vivid elements of literary technique. So it's not just going to be, oh, this talks about the plot. There should be a quote in the story that you read or a passage that gives us insight to the character, to the setting, to the theme, to several different literary techniques. So you're going to start with the quote, and then you're going to start your actual essay double-spaced after the quote. The first paragraph will summarize the plot, give us details about the characters, the setting. Basically, just think of it as a one-paragraph summary over what happened. Hit the key points. Then you'll have 2 to 3 paragraphs on the quotation's content. Explain how the quote relates to the story. Why is it important? If you hear in these 2 paragraphs, you have the luxury of going more in depth. So if you talk about the story of an hour, you may just kind of high-level overview in that first paragraph, and then the second paragraph you can go in more detail about the character or about the theme, about the importance of the title, anything you just decide to include in there about why that quote is important. Then you have 2 to 3 paragraphs on the passage's form. You're going to look at how it relates to literary techniques, characterization, plot, setting, symbolism, point of view, anything that we've talked about so far. 2 paragraphs. So ideally, if a quote gives us more information about the character, that's 1 paragraph. If it also talks about symbolism, that's another paragraph. Boom, 2 paragraphs done right there. And then you have a conclusion paragraph that summarizes, just like you would any other essay. You sum it up. You sum up the story, why the quote's important, and how it uses the literary techniques. That's a minimum, if you do just 2 paragraphs in those middle, of 6 paragraphs. If on average a 5-paragraph essay is 2 pages, we should be looking at least 2.5 pages for this. If it's more, if it's less, it's not okay. If it's more, that's fine. You can definitely elaborate on this one, but I don't want less than 2 pages. And then if you click on the final link in there, a sample close reading, it shows you, so this is one reason why I'm not going to be lenient about formatting. It shows you exactly how to format it. Your header is up at the top right, your name, my name, our class, the date, title right below that, and then it shows you the quote. It's indented over, the whole thing's indented, it's single spaced, and then it gives us the author and the page number. And then after that it goes back to double space and goes right into it. So the essay itself doesn't follow necessarily the full details paragraph by paragraph, so don't use that as a jumping off point, but I want you to see kind of how they analyze based on the requirements. So for the graded assignments, it's similar to what we've been doing. There's only one difference. Instead of a discussion post, you're going to be submitting a brief summary of what you're going to be talking about. So the close reading paper is due on March 4th. This is a pre-writing for that essay. If you looked at it before today, sorry, it said October 15th. That was last semester's due date. So obviously you're not going to submit that on October 15th, but it should be updated to show March 4th. So you're going to read the assigned readings for the unit, as well as the information that we just went over. I want you to choose your short story, provide me with the passage you're going to use. So in a Word document, write out the passage and start to give examples of how you're going to demonstrate its importance. And if you have specific literary techniques you're going to use, tell me which ones you're focusing on. If you're not sure yet, that's fine. Again, this is due by Sunday, so the only issue is you only have a week from then to figure out the literary elements and write the paper. So before you submit this, I would like to see kind of the formulation. This isn't an outline per se, but it's more, this is why I think that this passage is important, and it relates to these literary techniques. So I know at least you know where you're heading. This is basically, it's not a first draft. It says think of it as a first draft. Your first draft would be a full draft, but it is a first thought process. It's a brainstorm, if you will, of the longer essay. So this is all due by Sunday. It should be at least half a page long because your quote in itself is going to probably be quarter of a page maybe. You don't have to follow MLA formatting for this one. You are welcome to, but you don't have to. Just make sure you submit something that shows you have thought this through and have an idea of where you're heading. Again, due by Sunday, no responses since it's not a discussion, so you don't have to worry about that. And then you have a fiction terms quiz, which basically asks you to define all of these different literary terms, So this will help you. We have right before spring break, we have a fiction exam that you'll do. This will help you study for that. So both of these, again, are due by Sunday before 11:59. If you have any questions, if you're going through this week and are not sure where you're headed, please let me know. Otherwise, that's about all I have. So just keep in touch with me. I'm going to get your discussions started on today. I think there's like 60 something still ungraded, so they may not all be graded today, but I will get to them as soon as possible. So I hope you'll have a great week, and I will check in next week. Bye.